Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, June 27th, 2018. We are in the Nashua North High School boardroom. The time is 6:32, and we are here to conduct what I hope to be our last budget meeting of this year. For the public, there is a sign-up sheet if you're interested. We also have copies of the agenda, some ground rules for deliberations, and a copy of Dr. Mosley's reduction proposal on the front table. Mr. Mosier is unable to join us tonight. We've connected with Mr. Guarino, who's joining us by phone. And I guess with that, Ms. Hohensee will act as clerk tonight. So with that, I'll ask Ms. Hohensee to please call the roll.
Mrs. Oden? Here. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Here.
Mrs. Timmons?
Here.
Mrs. Hohensee is here. Mrs. Van Twyver?
Here.
Mr. Greeno's on the phone. Are you alone in a room by yourself, Mr. Greeno?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Porter?
Here.
Dr. Mosley, Dr. McKinney, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, Mr. Donovan are also here. We're all set.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing I'd like to do is, previously when we met a few months ago, I proposed some ground rules for deliberations, and I am suggesting that we do them, that we incorporate them into tonight's proceedings. So they've been previously distributed, and I'll just ask if there are any objections.
I object.
Okay, on what grounds, may I ask?
You need a two-thirds vote to change rules. Those are rule changes.
Actually not. It's majority when you publish them prior to the meeting. And this is not a rule change.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let me try this. Since there's an objection, what I propose is that we vote on these one at a time. So the first motion is that all member proposals will be heard and voted upon. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? May we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Oden?
I'm sorry, hold on. Ms. Porter?
I'm unsure why we need these. If we follow Robert's rules, I believe that should be sufficient.
Actually, we've had issues in the past where in this particular committee, there have been a great deal of interruptions, and I just want to ensure that everybody's clear that they have a voice and that they will be heard, because that has not occurred in this committee prior. This is a safeguard to ensure that, and essentially, we have agreements going in that all voices will be, all member proposals will be heard and voted upon. That's what the motion is. We have a second.
This
Mr.
is a waste
Guarino?
of time. It's a waste of time. This is redundant to Robert's rules. No.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. Ms. Timmons?
Is it possible that we vote on all 12 at one time instead of going through them individually?
To answer your question, that's what I tried to do before Mr. Guarino objected, and in response to his objection, I thought it would be best if we just do them individually. So I would have preferred that we voted on them one at a time, but Mr. Guarino's objection, I believe, took that consideration away from us.
No, it didn't.
So, Mr. Guarino, I realize you're not here, but at the same time, I'm going to ask you not to interrupt. If you wish to participate, please do so. I'm happy to acknowledge you, but please do not interrupt. And if you do, I'll just rule you out of order. And if you do it twice, I'll follow the protocol that Mrs. Oden used the other night, which would be to have, if you called out of order twice, would just ask you to leave the meeting. So in your case, should we get to that point, I would just disconnect your phone line. So just understand.
Well, that's real fair. That's real fair. I can see that.
And if you continue to interrupt, that's the direction.
Well, you have no way of knowing if I raise my hand or if I want to speak.
Well, one of the ways we've done it in the past is to poll everybody in the room and then poll the people who are attending by phone. So that's one way
Well,
I can be
I think
sure.
you're just wasting time. You're just wasting time. You should get on with the business at hand, which is the budget, which is in front of the
Mr.
board right now.
Guarino.
You should bring it on the floor and stop wasting time with these rule changes. And we all know what the rules are. It's Robert's rules. Just go by the rules. Go by Robert's rules. Do what we've done in the past. You don't have to make this big, whoop-to-do.
Ms. Van Twyver.
May I suggest to Mr. Guarino that if he wishes to speak, to press the key so that we hear that Mr. Hallowell suggested that to me one time, and it worked very well. So would you try that once, Mr. Guarino?
Sure.
Do you?
Oh, you want me to try it now?
Yes, a
Yes,
test.
sir. Okay, so that one.
All right.
We all heard that. So
Okay.
that's in that way we'll be able to identify that you want to make a statement. Is that acceptable, Mr. Guarino?
Sure.
Thank you. So are there any other comments, Mrs. Oden?
Yes, thank you. I think these are unnecessary. I think basically if you follow Robert's rules, and I do want to clarify that the other night I said at the board meeting, if I rule you out of order once, if I have to rule you out of order a second time, I will use your name, and the third time, there were 3 issues to that. The third time, I will ask you to leave the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Oden. I would abide and amend my comments to be consistent with that of Mrs. Oden. So at this time, I'd like to call a request of vote, a roll call on the first item. All member proposals will be heard and voted upon. Roll call, please.
On the motion, all member proposals will be heard and voted upon. Mrs. Oden?
No,
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
No.
Mrs. Timmons?
No.
Mrs. Hohensee votes yes. Ms. Van Twyver?
yes,
Mr. Guarino?
No.
And Mrs. Porter?
No.
We've got 3 to 5?
3-5.
3-5. So it fails.
So the motion fails 3-5. The second motion, all members will be heard on each question. Any comments, Ms. Raymond?
I would like to echo other people. You have provided a very detailed agenda, and I feel like most of us are ready to dive right in to the items that you have suggested, and perhaps we could try that. And then if things are not going smoothly, then we could come back to making specific rules. I'm concerned that we're 10 minutes into the meeting, and you have a very nice specific agenda, and I think we all would like to act on the agenda.
Well, I appreciate your comment. Since we've started this is on the agenda. I would like I said, my intent was to pass it in one motion. Mr. Guarino, by his objection, caused an alternative Plan B to kick into effect. Ms. Porter?
Point of order. That's not correct.
Could we ask Mr. Guarino to retract his objections so that we can vote on them entirely?
Actually, I would like to go through these, and since Mr. Guarino laid the foundation, I think...
Point of order. That's not correct.
Excuse me, Mr. Guarino, that is your first warning.
No, it's not. Point of order is part of Robert's rules, and I get to interrupt when I say point of order. Point of information. It's part of Robert's rules.
Go ahead, Mr. Guarino.
I just made a point of information. That's not correct. Didn't have anything to do with what I said. You said you asked if there was any objections. I said yes. So you were the one that decided to take them individually, one by one. So don't put this on anyone else. You did it. You're doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. So
All right, you're welcome.
what I tried to do was get them, I tried to address them all at the same time. You objected, and therefore I am dealing with them separately. That's just the consequence of the action.
Right.
If
and
you
that's
guys
your
want to get
decision.
through this
That's
stuff
your
tonight,
decision.
And that's
That's
the
your
ruling of the
decision.
chair, and that's the way it is, as you know.
That's your decision.
Exactly my decision. Ms.
Right.
Timmons.
So don't put it on anyone else. That's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. Can we just say, can we vote on questions 1 through 12? And at one time, we already read it, and just vote on the entirety of this document instead of wasting time? We're already 15 minutes into this meeting, and we could just take one vote and we'll be done.
What
And then we can move
I
on.
thank you for your point, Mrs. Oden.
I'd like to make a motion that numbers 1 through 12 be voted on in one motion.
I second it.
Any discussion? I would like to discuss it, Mrs. Oden.
Could I speak to
Please.
my motion? I just think we have some work to do. This is wrapped up in a technicality. I think if we just get to our agenda, we have tomorrow night. I don't think anybody's planning to come in here on Friday or next week. So I think we should shoot for getting this done tonight, and I don't think we should waste time on this.
Okay. So any other question over here? So here's what I think could solve our problem. I'm willing to vote on this in one chunk, if I can call it that. What I would ask is that the clerk read all 12 points so that the public is clear on what we're voting on, and then we can proceed and vote.
Okay, number 2, all members will be heard on each question. Number 3, any attempt to stop debate before all members have spoken on an issue will be ruled out of order by the chair. Rule number 4, any attempt to prematurely bring closure to this budget process without all members' requests being heard and voted upon will be ruled out of order by the chair. Number 5, any issue needing further information will be tabled and addressed at the next meeting. Number 6, administrators, once they complete their budget reduction proposal, are asked to limit their participation to only answering questions from board members. Number 7, there is no set time limit for tonight's meeting, but every effort will be made to end the meeting at a reasonable time and at a logical point of adjournment. Number 8, should any member interrupt another member, they shall be ruled out of order by the chair. Number 9, should any member get off topic, they will be gently reminded to return to the topic under discussion by the chair. Number 10, all votes will be roll call and follow the appropriate parliamentary protocol. Number 11, should any member interrupt the meeting, the chair will call a 10-minute recess. Number 12, should a member continue to interrupt the meeting, the member will be asked to relinquish their microphone to the nearest board member for safekeeping, with the understanding that they will not be recognized by the chair to speak for the remainder of the meeting. Said member will be included in the roll call voting.
Thank you, Mrs. Hohensee. So regarding the last point, I would prefer to use Mrs. Oden's guideline that she used the other night in terms of essentially 3 warnings, if that's okay with the board. Could you please call the roll?
Okay, just let me put this down. Questions 2 through 12 amended, as amended by the chair. Mrs. Oden?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the motion? And you said there's an amendment. Was the amendment voted upon?
What I said, it would be part of this vote, and that was that number 12 really be what you had used the other night, what you addressed earlier this evening.
And I think you have to make an amendment because my motion only included number 1 through 12.
Okay, so in that regard, I would like to amend and strike number 12, and strike number 12, make an amendment by striking number 12 and essentially replacing it with okay, let me think about this for a second. Members being ruled out of, or if a member is ruled out of order twice, the third time, at that time, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Can we please vote on that? May I have a second on that amendment, please?
Second.
Thank you. And can we please call the roll for that amendment?
A second.
Okay, I'm just reading the amendment for number 12. If a member is ruled out of order twice on the third instance, he will be asked
To leave the meeting.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay, if a member is ruled out of order twice on the third instance, he will be asked to leave the meeting. Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Timmons?
Yes.
Mrs. Hohensee votes yes. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino?
Yes.
And Mrs. Porter?
Yes.
Okay, that one passes unanimously. 8-0.
If there's no objection, I'd like to go to the main motion and request a roll call, which is to, I'll let the clerk read the,
It would be the questions number 2 to 12, and number 12 is amended by the previous motion. Mrs. Oden?
Yes. No, I'm sorry, read the motion again, please.
The motion is your motion amended by 12 as we just voted. So it'd be questions 2 to 12, but number 12 is if a member is ruled out of order twice on the third instance, he will be asked to leave the meeting.
so this is to discuss, this is to approve all of it at once.
This is your motion?
Yes, yes.
What?
Okay, so you vote yes.
Samoja's not here.
And who seconded your motion?
Ms. Timmons?
No, I didn't.
No?
I think you're kind of confused.
Okay.
Let's clarify this. We're voting on this 2 to 12, right?
To 12.
Yes mean this will
1
pass.
through 12.
1 through 12.
Oh, 12
Well,
one
2
is done.
1 is done.
One is done,
2
sorry.
through 12 mean yes, this will pass. No mean it will not pass.
Correct.
Okay.
So we did,
Voting yes is for the rules, no.
You
is
vote yes for the rule and no for the rule. If you vote
Please
yes.
continue the vote.
okay,
I'm confused.
who seconded your motion? Do we have a second?
My
for you?
motion was to accept all of these together.
Correct.
That's exactly what we're voting on,
That's what
Mrs.
we're
Oden.
voting on.
That's
but-
what I
But
thought.
number 12
Okay.
was amended. Somebody,
Voted on the amendment, didn't we?
We did, we
Yes,
all
we did.
accepted it, it was
Yeah.
unanimous. So we're voting on your motion to accept all 12
Okay.
at once.
Okay, all right. This is
Thank
clear.
So I believe Mrs. Oden has voted
okay,
yes?
Affirmative.
she voted yes, so then we have Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
No.
Mrs. Timmons?
Ms. Timmons?
No, I'm sorry. I'm confused again. Are we voting to accept these rules?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
all of them at the same time.
And then we'll have another motion to see if we want to keep these rules or not keep these rules.
No, this will
This
be-
is to
No,
vote
this
on
is
them,
for
it's you either
it.
accept them or you don't. If you
No.
vote yes, we will use them. If you
No.
vote no, we will not.
We're kind of confused here. I do not want to accept these rules. So,
Voting, Mrs. Oden.
I believe my motion said I wanted to vote on all 12 of them at once, not that I accept them, but I thought we should vote on all of them. If you read my motion again,
You're correct, Mrs. Oden. Thank you.
Thank you.
that's a
Thank
different
you.
story.
All
Okay.
right. So then yes, I would
So
like
for
to.
clarification, and perhaps we'll start the roll call vote again for clarification. This motion is to vote on numbers 2 through 12 as amended as one group.
Okay.
Okay.
So could you start with Mrs. Oden again,
I can.
please?
Mrs. Oden?
yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee votes yes. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino?
Yes.
And Mrs. Porter?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 8-0. Motion passes. So then we go back to the final question would be the vote on the questions, number 2 to 12.
So the motion to accept them and use them or not? Yes being accept and use, no being not to use them. Any other discussion? Ms. Hohensee, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Mrs. Oden?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Mrs. Timmons?
No.
Mrs. Hohensie votes yes. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino?
No.
Mrs. Porter?
No.
So that vote was 3 to 5, and it fails.
Okay, so the next order of business is the administrative budget reduction proposal. Superintendent Mosley, Mr. Donovan. If members of the public would like a copy of it, if you don't already have it, there are copies at the desk. Gentlemen, it's all yours. Mr. Guarino, you have something to say?
Yes, I have to leave the meeting at this point in time, but I may come back in about an hour or so. So thank you very much, and hopefully I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Are we able to call him back in an hour? How does that work?
You know, that I've never encountered that before where someone left and wanted to return. So anybody have Robert's rules
I have them.
to check? Ms. Timmons?
Mr. Guarino is at work, and he was willing to attend the meeting from 6 to 6:30 to 7, and then call back after his employment is over at 8:15. That's what he wanted to do. He had
Okay,
to-
well,
because he's at work.
that's fine. So please note the record, Mr. Guarino left the meeting at 6:55 PM. And
Would like to
he's
be
going to
called
have to
back.
figure out how he's going to get us to call him, so.
We'll just call him back.
I think, well, let's deal with it when the time comes. Personally, I think that's quite irregular, and I'm not sure. We'll have to do some research. Ms. Van Twyver, maybe we have some time. If you could see if someone can leave the meeting and return. The problem with that is there are deliberations that occur through the entire night that will eventually be voted on at the end, and I would make the case if he's not here for the full deliberation, he doesn't know what was discussed, and I would say that he was not
But he knows his
informed.
mind, and he knows what he want to do, so.
Well, let's see if he actually gets in touch with us to call back. So, Dr. Mosley? Mr. Donovan?
We're just going to briefly, we're just going to get right to it, so I'll just turn it over to Dan.
Okay, you have in your package today, the Board of Aldermen gave a increase to the school district of 2.5%. That is a difference between the budget that was sent over by the Board of Ed to the Board of Aldermen, which was 3.41%. The dollar difference is $975,403. So at this point, this board needs to reduce its budget, which is $110,329,993, down to $109,354,590. So working with Dr. Mosley, administration has put together a list that equals that total. Basically, if we look at, I'll just do it in groups. The first three items on there, to me, are simple adjustments that should be made. And if anyone needs ask any questions on any of those, they can feel free to do so. The second set of items are basically new items that were added to the budget. Like I've explained to people, when you go and buy a new house, if you want to put in new carpets and you want to put in new furniture and you want a new driveway, sometimes you only have to pick two of those things. So at this point, we've gone through, we have not eliminated any positions. We've kept some equilibrium in the district. We have added a teacher contract whereby they have all got to their own steps, and there's another couple of contracts. So we got through this year without any of these new items. It's our feeling that we can get through one more year. It's not that we don't want these items, we certainly do. We're hoping that in next year's, the fiscal year 20 budget, these things will reemerge.
Excuse me, Mr. Donovan, I do have one question on the principal membership fees per the new principal contract.
Yes.
One of the things that was discussed when we reviewed the contract was that this is actually costing us less than what was previously spent
Yes.
for, so how much money was saved, and is that accounted for here?
The total amount saved through the contract is about $5,000. The amount of the reduction is $22,670 because we added in this year's budget, that wasn't in the budget the last couple of years, I think it was $17,865. We added, which was going to be the membership dues for the assistant principals. That was added into this fiscal year 19 budget. So this $22,000 is taking that out and the savings brought upon by the new contract. Added together, that's what gets you 22.
Okay, is there still $5,000 savings sitting out there?
No, it's the 17,000 that we
Okay, and
added
the
plus
plus
the 5 equals the 22.
Thank you.
Okay, then the other group, as we defined it sort of as other reductions. These are items that we talked about. They're items that are in this budget. Some of them are new. Like I said, we can go through each one. And then that got us within $112,870 of the $975. So on page 2, there's other options. Those are items that I don't particularly want to do, but we need to get, if we're going to get to $975, we have to cut something. The reason the heating fuel and the retirement pay numbers are there, which are $50,000 and $40,000, is we do have reserves on our balance sheet, so to speak. So if those two accounts were to overrun, we could go to the balance sheet and charge the amounts overrun there. So there's a little bit of a safety factor on those two lines that most lines we don't have. Thus the reason for choosing those.
Mr. Donovan,
yes.
if I may, on the first item about reducing curriculum budget for $20,000, could you please explain what those reductions might be?
I don't know exactly what they would be. The curriculum budget is a list of about 15 items. So I spoke with Dr. McKinney, and he would figure out where that would be. It might be in additional hours, it might be, I don't know exactly where it would be, but the total curriculum budget's, I think, about $585,000, so.
So is it fair to say this would be a reduction applied wherever it could be applied? They don't have any specifics right now to be
Yeah.
determined?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Ms. Hohensee.
Thank you. What do you mean by curriculum hours? Like when they develop curriculum, something they do over the summer, or I don't understand what you mean by curriculum hours. If you've got a full-time person working on curriculum or a teacher doing it, they're still a full
Yeah, no.
salary.
It wouldn't be a salaried person. The curriculum budget for 19, which is right here, is $586,000. For example, the books line is $304,000. If he chose, Dr. McKinney could reduce the $304,000 in books by $20,000. He could reduce his testing materials line. He could reduce his supplies line. There's a number of different lines within his budget. He hasn't specifically said so at this point. If I needed to book it tonight, I just reduce the book line. He can always transfer things during the year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on this segment or up until now by any members? Ms. Van Twyver.
I have a question about heating fuel. $50,000 doesn't sound like much money. It's not going to make a big dent in the heating, correct?
Well, it's reducing it. The total heating fuel, I believe, is $989,000. This would reduce it by $50,000.
So it's not going to make our children freeze at all?
No.
No way, right?
No, we're not, no.
Well, you know, Mr. Donovan, I've always thought that we should reduce our heating by 1 degree in every one of these schools to save some money, but...
Well, we do manage our heating, and we do have a good rate. We have a locked-in rate, price per therm for next school year, which is a low number. So I'm assuming we're going to save some money over what it was this year. Now, obviously, it's variable, because if we have a lot of cold weather, you know, it's A times B to equal the cost, but we do have a low B. The actual cost per term is low. And like I said, we do have a reserve on the balance sheet of $100,000. If we would overrun that line, we could reach out and take the money from there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry. Any other questions from board members at this time? Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. So my question is just to help me to understand, if we keep all of our services and our staff at the levels that there are this year, we still have to cut, like, if we're giving up the things we asked for in addition, and we're keeping everything else with the same service levels, we still have to cut in order to meet the money that was allotted to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the 112,000.
Okay. Okay.
Any
I'm unhappy
follow-up?
with that. Yeah.
Well, largely, you have to understand where the money went. I mean, there were significant increases in payroll based on the union contracts. So
Right.
that pretty much eats up the increase we got from the city.
Right, and I understand that, and I understand that we're still thousands of dollars less for our staff than, our neighboring districts. I'm disappointed, and I don't like this process, but I'm gonna power through.
The sad reality is the city has a limited amount of money. And let's be clear, the original cap was 1.6%. That's the mayor's number that he announced last night. He gave the Board of Ed 2.5%, so nearly a point over whatever, of citywide, how it all averages out. So we are getting more money than we would have gotten had he just kept to the cap spending. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Would you like to continue, please?
Well, that's all I have to say. Like I said, if there's any questions on line items, be happy to answer them. But
Ms. Hohensee?
There was a line item, and I can't find it in the budget, where we took a CTE teacher, and we're going to elevate her to a director and give her 20,000 more. Is that still in the budget, or is that out of the budget? And how does that work, having two directors?
I believe what you're speaking about was a request was made by one of the CTE directors for the preschool person who's currently in that position that's a coordinator position to move it to a more of a teacher level position. That person is not paid for by the operating budget, so it's not something that's paid for through the special revenue fund, because children pay to attend that program. And so and whether that person gets a raise or not is certainly not up to me. It would be a discussion with Human Resources and the CT director and superintendent, I would assume. But it wouldn't deal with this budget, so.
But it's still in the proposed budget that we're looking at tonight?
No.
It was removed?
It was never put in. This is the operating budget. That's a special revenue fund.
Okay, because we talked about it when we talked about the budget, so I apologize.
Yeah, but
if
it's
I'm
not in the
confused.
operating budget.
Okay, so if that goes through HR, and we will look at it at a different time and place.
Whatever the process is,
Correct, thank you.
That person is a teacher or not? So I don't know that we
I
would
don't
see it.
believe she's a teacher. I don't honestly know what her background is. I just know that she runs the preschool program. I don't know what her background is.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Mr. Donovan? If seeing none, let me ask a question. Previously, there was some misinformation, unclear information surrounding textbooks, and I would just like to give you a chance to clarify for everybody exactly what the plan is around textbooks so people can feel more comfortable knowing what we're doing going forward.
Yes, the textbook line itself is pretty much the same as what it was last year. The textbook line, I think on the information I sent out, well, I talked about the curriculum budget as a whole. The information I sent to the to the school board in an email, but there was one year, I believe it was the fiscal year 16, where we were putting a new math program in. I believe it was at the elementary level. So that year, the book line as well as the curriculum line increased significantly, but for the most part, the curriculum budget for the last 3 years has been pretty steady of about between 575 to 600,000. So I don't think we really have, do we have enough money to buy all the books we need? I'm certainly not suggesting that, but I am saying that we haven't made any cuts to book lines. That was not
Yes,
accurate.
and I wanted to convey that because that came up through an Ed Council meeting, and it led to discussions here that turned out to be incorrect. So I just wanted to use this as a vehicle for clarification.
Okay.
The other thing is, Mr. Donovan spoke to an email that the board received where he provided, I think it was the previous 6 years of curriculum, total curriculum, the 15 line items that you spoke of earlier, to that $585,000 roughly this year. And the confusion that we had on that was from conversations we had in the curriculum committee meeting. So I just want to say that's where the confusion sourced from. So I'm pleased to know that we're relatively flat and consistent, which for me is important. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Donovan? So if I refer everybody to the agenda that I sent out, we've pretty much just covered items 1 through 9 in terms of queries or whatever. I think earlier at the previous meeting, there were some questions around the expense line for board contract services. Does someone see to recall what that was?
Could you repeat that?
Number 10, the expense line for board contract services.
Don't know.
Do you recall? Okay.
I don't know.
Salary lines for IT staff positions. I know that we've had openings for a while. Are they fully staffed over there?
The IT department, I believe there was a person just left this week or last week, so they're down one person as far as I know. I think that's it. And
Okay.
that was a recent.
Okay, but we're keeping the head count the same? There's no changes over there, is that right?
No changes to that group.
Okay, thank you. The next, number 12, is the iReady funding. So I was just curious, I mean, previous years we had a strong emphasis on iReady, and we had a data analyst that was intimately working with that data for predictive work and curriculum development, all sorts of things. And when that person left the district, that effort, we haven't seen any discussion about it this school year at all. So are there any plans to, since we're not using it in that way, are there any plans to reduce the iReady funding? We do the testing 3 times a year, if I'm not mistaken, and I forget exactly which grades when we do them. Are you looking to make any reductions? Could we afford any reductions there, given the de-emphasis compared to what we were doing last year? Or at least what I perceive to be a de-emphasis.
There's, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
I believe there's a plan to rehire a data analyst. I'm not involved with the process personally, but there's still, the money is still in the budget to make that hire.
Okay, thank you. The next item, oh, I am so sorry. I promise before we do anything else, we'll get through this and then I will do the public comment. I'm very sorry. I apologize for that, but I will come back to you. I am very sorry about that. The TIA funding, TIA position funding, can you just inform the members of the board and the public what the situation is around that? I find this very interesting, the situation that surrounds this particular position, and would just want people to become aware of it. I'm not sure everybody on the board knows or understands it.
Well, they are TIAs, they help in the elementary schools with the computers. There is not one per elementary school. They're shared amongst schools. I believe there's, I'd have to look at the book, but I think 8 of them. 8, yep. 8, not 8. So yes, there's 8 of them, they're shared. There's no reduction in this budget on the tiers. It is a non-affiliated position. I don't know what else to say about it.
So as I understand it, they deliver the curriculum developed by a certified curriculum specialist for elementary schools in technology. That's really what they are. But what's really weird about it is they're not part of the teachers union and they're not considered teachers, yet they do instruction. And I always found that kind of weird. The salary, number 14 was answered. Is it relative to 15, salary lines for the ELL teachers? I recall you mentioned that they are not included in your, yes, you've included them in your reduction proposal. But I personally forgot I know we wanted to give you 4, and you highlighted that 2 are being reduced. So is it my memory that we only approved 2 and those 2 are withdrawn, or didn't?
Yes.
Okay, that is the actual case.
There were 2 that were added. There was a hope to add 2 more. There was never a motion to
Right.
add 2 more. So this is just to bring us back to the amount we have
Currently.
right now.
So we are not adding any ELL teachers as a result of this budget. So I just wanted that for
Assuming that
clarification.
that's taken out.
Assuming we follow, yes, the recommendations tonight.
Yes.
I understand. 16 has been explained. Brentwood Staffing, I had a question about this. When I and Ms. Hohensee went over to Brentwood, it was very interesting. We had a very nice visit with those folks. And for me, it seems as though there's a huge potential there for inbound tuition. And I know currently, I believe, and somebody correct me, most, if not all of those positions are part-time positions, the teaching positions. I think they may work Brentwood part of the time and have other assignments in other places, or some of them are just part-time. And I would appreciate it if we could explore really the revenue potential for that program. What investment might we as a district have to make in terms of making the staff full-time, that with that staffing we could accommodate X number of inbound students, which could help offset the costs of that particular program. So obviously we can't do it this budget year, but well, I guess maybe could you? I mean, if we did an analysis and concluded that if we hired 3 people and we upgraded the program in January, could the board allocate based on the projected revenue that we receive? Is that a possibility?
As long as the revenue amount that we're going to receive within the year covers the additional cost, we could do it.
Okay, something we could explore?
Yeah.
And
I mean, and
that's all.
if we were to do it, I would suggest we sort of get the students first and then hire the teachers, because I don't think
Fair
you're going to
enough.
get 7 or 8 students all at once.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it might take 6 months to recruit the students, which is
Sure.
a total possibility.
Sure.
But I just wanted to see if we still had some options attached to that, especially with the new facility that's going to be available. You know, we're really starting fresh in a fresh building in town,
New
public
co-
accessible.
New coordinator, yeah.
Great, so it's a good starting point. Any other member comments or questions for either Dr. Mosley, Mr. Donovan? Seeing none, what I'd like to do is renew my apology to the public for jumping over you and give you the opportunity to come forward now. I don't have the list. I saw Gary Hoffman was on the name. If you could come forward and, yeah, that's fine. You're welcome to do that. Yeah. So please give us, state your name and address, please, and give us your comment.
Gary Hoffman, 38 Perham Street, Unit D, Nashua, New Hampshire. I was looking at the proposed budget cuts, and I would first just like to commend Dan Donovan. I think you made the best of a bad situation. You know, thank you for that. I was speaking with some aldermen today. They said that the state reevaluation isn't until later on, and they do have a promise to then look back at this budget and perhaps do some ads later on this summer. And I don't know, I assume you guys were informed of that, but there is the potential to do some additions. I was speaking with a candidate who's running for governor today about English language learners in the state of New Hampshire. And I was looking at some of the data, and since 2007, 2008 school year, we've almost exactly doubled the amount of English language learners in Nashua. I understand exactly why Dr. Mosley put the recommendation forward that we add 4 of them. And so if you do get some more money, that would probably be my number one, where I would put the money in. I think that, 2 certainly not enough, but that is absolutely where I would devote that money if you do have a chance later on this summer. Third, I looked at some of the other items. We have a lot of needs in this district. I believe, as Dr. Mosley has said, this district's been on a diet for a long time. I think we've been under budgeting due to the spending cap and a number of reasons for things like professional development, simple equipment upgrades. A lot of our desks in our schools are falling apart. And I've mentioned this before, I looked, we've put the grant writer on the list to be eliminated several times before. We add it, we take it off, we add it, we take it off. We might need to get creative about how to get some of that grant money, because those one-time expenses, things like desks and books and professional development, not necessarily salaried employees, grants are really perfect for. I've mentioned this before, that this district might want to create a nonprofit that's aligned with our mission, so you always have a grant writer doing that work. Boston's done this; they raised $14 million last year. So it's something I think I feel like every year I see the grant writer on the axe, because there's not a lot of extra money. And I understand why, but there are some definite needs that can be grant funded, and that's one way to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Any other questions from the public at this time? Mr. Donovan, I do have one more question that eluded me personally. And just for clarification, when you go to the beginning of yes, it's on the first side, and you speak to the substitute loyalty program, is it in or is it out? I'm uncertain. Are we trying to allocate more money to reward our, frequent substitute teachers? I'm just uncertain. If you could please clarify that for us in the public.
Well, actually, this board did approve by a vote of 4-2 to add it on March 22nd of 18. As you can see it there, the money was taken from the salary error related to the Charlotte Ave 5th grade teachers. The way I portrayed it on this sheet, I actually have the negative 28,000 there because the payroll adjustment number, the second item on your sheet, the 24,863, if you look on the second page, it's in the blue. That's a net of the 4 sort of payroll changes that should be made to the budget. So at this point in time, that is officially in the budget, the 28,000. So the loyalty program of adding, I think it was $10. I'd have to double check, but
whatever the proposal was.
Yes, that's effectively, as we're speaking today, that's in the budget. And if this sheet, if this total amount was voted on, then it would still be in.
Okay. So if we follow that same train of thought and look at the same part of that particular spreadsheet, where it's included and you're showing a negative number, 24,863, and then the 28,000. So is that really, there's a $3,137 shortfall to fund that 28,000? Is the 24,000 really feeding the 28,000? The difference between the continuing 5th grade teacher and the previous number?
Well, the
It just works out that way.
No, there's not a shortfall. The 24,863 includes 4 adjustments. When this 28,000 was made, they were talking about just one of those
Okay.
adjustments, so when you net them all together.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public, questions from the public? Does the board have any other questions they may wish to ask? Entertain a motion. Ms. Porter?
I'd like to make a comment before we do a
Oh, sure.
motion, please. I didn't realize we were making a motion already. I think that this is an extremely difficult task. In a perfect world, of course, we would want everything, and we know that we need it desperately. I want to thank the alderman for returning the budget with an increase that will allow us to maintain our current staffing. I think that Dr. Mosley has made it a priority, and I think it's an important priority to bring some stability to the district. And maintaining current staffing is something I think we can all agree on. We also want to maintain the current services that we're providing. That would be things like OT, PT, which are contracted out, our software and IT, et cetera. The third thing that we would be able to maintain is the $1.5 million that goes to schools, and that's based on the number of students in its school. I had a long conversation with Mr. Donovan, and he was extremely helpful. So he explained to me that that would be $30,000, for example, to Amherst Street, and up to $200,000 at the high schools. And those are things that go for paper, for allowances that teachers get for supplies, and the proposed cuts we have here would allow us to maintain the current level, which I think is another important way to bring stability to the district. In my conversation with Mr. Donovan, the whole section, and I don't think it's showing up here, but on the list of the new items that have been eliminated, I think that we can agree that we would want them all. And as Mrs. Raymond mentioned earlier, it's painful to have to be up here and say that we can't have all of those things because we know how critical they are. The fact of the matter is we don't have the money. So we're kind of looking at, or I'm kind of looking at that as a wish list, and as Mr. Hoffman said, we do need to prioritize those so that if we do get some money later on, we'll be able to add some of those things in. I think also that just because we're not adding them in this year doesn't mean that we're not going to try to do them next year. And while it's easy to look at these things that we can't add, we still need to focus on what we've done. We have some good contracts. We're keeping people. We're not cutting anybody. We're working hard to bring stability to the district. I wouldn't want anyone to think that we take this lightly. Not being able to add those ELL teachers it's painful. And we know that that's something that affects kids' lives every day. So I think that I can speak for myself, but that's a very high priority. And if we were to get some money, I think that probably that's where it would go. So I don't see any other way. I appreciate the work that Mr. Donovan and Dr. Mosley put into this, and it's my feeling that these cuts they're painful, but it's the lesser of the evils. So in the absence of money falling from the sky, I don't really see what option there is. So.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. I just want to kind of a last call for comments, either from the public or the board. If not, I'm going to ask that we move a motion forward. Ms. Hohensee?
I move that we accept the proposed.
Could you wait? I think Ms. Oden had a comment. Yes.
I just, I feel the same as Porter. What I would like to say, should we get more money, my priorities will be to see what we can provide as direct support for our students in our classrooms. The ELL teachers, the kindergarten paras, that has an immediate effect upon our classrooms and our students. And those will be my priorities if we're fortunate enough to get a little bit more money back from the aldermen. So I just wanted to say those are my priorities.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members or the public? If not, I don't see any. Ms. Hohensee?
Thank you. I move to accept the administration's proposed adjustments to the budget.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Van Twyver. Any discussion? I seeing none. Ms. Hohensee, could you please call the roll?
Okay. Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond?
Yes.
Mrs. Timmons?
Yes.
Mrs. Hohensee votes yes. Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino? Oh, he's absent. Mrs. Porter?
Yes.
So it's 7-0.
Thank you. Seeing no other business before the board, tonight, Budget Committee, Ms. Van Twyver, I can't tell by the look on your face. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wanted to move to adjourn.
And I was going to acknowledge that. Before I do that, I want to call on Dr. Mosley, and before I call on Dr. Mosley, I just want to say we have a special Board of Education meeting convening pretty much immediately after this meeting, where by the board itself can now accept the recommendation from the Budget Committee so that we can have this in place when we walk out of here. So Mr. Donovan can spend money on July 1st, and everybody, we've got all our T's and I's taken care of. Dr. Mosley, did you want to say?
Exactly what I was going to say, Mr. Collins.
Okay, thank you. Please.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Ms. Raymond. Oh,
Timmons.
Ms. Timmons. I saw your hand move. I thought I saw your lips move. I'm sorry. Any discussion? Ms. Hohensee, could you please call the roll?
Can I ask why we're calling the roll if we've got nobody on the telephone?
Good point. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously 8-0. Time at the end of the Budget Committee meeting is 7:30. We will reconvene in 10 minutes as the Board of Education. Mrs. Oden will have the chair. 10 minutes okay, Mrs. Oden? Okay, adjourn. 7:30 p.m. Thank you.
I would like to call the special Board of Education meeting to order. It is 7:45 on June 27th, and we're in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Okay. Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond is here. Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Ms. Hohensee?
Here.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Here.
Ms. Porter?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, now? All right.
Okay, looking for a motion.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the Budget Committee to accept the administrative reductions of $975,403 from the superintendent's original proposal.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And I'm sorry, Mrs. Van Twyver, you seconded it?
Miss Van Twyver.
Miss Van Twyver.
What's so difficult about that?
I don't know.
Just call me Elizabeth from now on. Jeez. And it's proper Ms. for every female.
Okay.
You did it too.
All right, I would like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 budget at a cost of $109,354,590.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. God, I forgot the words.
All in favor?
All in favor, thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Good night.
Opposed unanimously. We have adjourned at 7:46.
Good night, ladies. Farewell.